So here we have a presentation on an article called Physiologic and Acoustic Differences Between Male and Female Voices. We're going to talk about all of the differences acoustically and physiologically between male and female voices. The article is by Ingo R. Titze. So here we have our introduction. Most of our knowledge of speech production usually comes from male voices that usually comes from studies from male speakers, because when they were doing studies, it would either be the male using his own voice or his colleague's voice. So assumptions and simplifications in the area of speech acoustics were often based on speech samples derived from males. This leaves us with the question: would the source filter theory of speech production develop the same way if female voices were used as the primary model instead of male? The purpose of the study was to withdraw comparisons of the male and female larynx based on the size, tissue properties, and the prephonatory glottal shape. First, we're going to start with size differences. So as you can see here, the anterior-posterior dimension of the male thyroid cartilage appears to be 20% larger than of the female. So this is how long the female cartilage is, and this is how much longer the male cartilage is, 20% longer than the female of the thyroid cartilage. Moving on to membranous vocal fold length of males and females. So the female and the male, the membranous vocal fold length appears to be here, and the males have shown to have 60% larger vocal fold length than of the female. Membranous growth length of the vocal folds in the developing years of both male and female are almost linear in both sexes up until the child enters the puberty stage. Much of the growth in vocal fold length takes place around the puberty age, especially in males. Once there is a sudden drop in fundamental frequency and the noticeable protrusion of the Adam's apple, the membranous growth length significantly differs. Membranous growth length of the vocal folds for female grows at a rate of around 0.4 millimeters per year, and the membranous growth length of the vocal folds for the male grows at about 0.7 millimeters per year. So the male's vocal folds growth length grows about 0.3 millimeters more per year than of the female. The age of 3 is usually the median age of which the vocal ligament begins to develop. In the picture below, a sudden change in the slope of the fundamental frequency versus length is seen. So for the male larynx, after about age 10, the mild slope in the F0 curve develops into a steep slope during the pubertal years. As shown below, the fundamental frequency changes more rapidly by the inverse length relationship. At age 20, the male larynx appears to be near the hyperbola again. In the female larynx, we see not much change is observed between ages 14 and 20 as the male does. So here we have the female, and here is the male, and we can see the steep slope right about there. Differences in vocal length and thickness. So during phonation, the vocal fold length is always less than the abducted length in both males and females. When vocal folds join together, there is a significant amount of shortening that happens due to the rotation and the translation of the fold processes. So here we see the connected data points. That's phonation in the chest register. And then the unconnected data points, that's phonation in the falsetto register. So in the chest register, which is the connected data points, we have length changes systematically from 50% of the abducted length to 70 to 80% of the abducted length. In the unconnected data points, which is here, which is the phonation in the falsetto register, there is no systematic increase in vocal fold length with fundamental frequency in the falsetto register. A systematic variation of fundamental frequency can be predicted by elongation of the membranous portion of the vocal folds. Continuing with the differences in vocal fold length and thickness. As tissue mass is added, stiffness is added at the same time because the tissue is attached to the boundaries. Since the fundamental frequency depends on the stiffness to mass ratio, no change in F0 would be expected by increased thickness. So because of the increased thickness, there would be no changes to the F0. Thickness and length are inversely proportional, and at low fundamental frequencies, they are almost equal. Conservation of tissue volume is most likely the cause of the inverse relationship rather than the muscular differences. Thickness of the male vocal folds are about 20 to 30% greater than of the female. The male vocal folds do not grow disproportionately in thickness in developmental years, only in membranous vocal fold length. Most of the male-female differences in F0 can be accounted for by the membranous vocal fold length. Now we're going to talk about the differences in elastic properties of vocal fold tissue. At higher strains, the solid line for females, which shows right here, this is the solid line for the females, are generally above the dashed lines for males, resulting in the female tissue being slightly stiffer as a whole. But there appears to be no great differences between males and females in the elastic properties of the vocal fold tissue. So there aren't any significant differences in the elastic properties of vocal fold tissue. Prephonatory, glottis, and modes of vibration. So these are male and female differences in the patterns of vibration. Male-female differences in the patterns of vibration. Females are more likely to have a triangularly shaped vocal fold with a more linearly convergent glottis, whereas the male vocal fold will have a more bulging medial surface. As far as registers, a certain amount of fluctuation in pitch and quality in the female voice may be due to the closer proximity of the mean fundamental frequency in the female voice to the primary register transition. So for males, the same register transition is observed in the same frequency range, and this is called secondary transition. Continuing on, the vocal fold vibration pattern in greater detail in the vertical cross section. There are 4 different vertical shapes that highlight the primary male-female differences and the opening-closing differences. Both males and females have a net convergence, but the stimulated male shape includes a bulging factor that gives the medial surface some curvature, whereas females shows a linearly convergent glottis. Another difference is the male-female difference in the contact area waveform. The stimulated female contact area waveform has a flatter portion during vocal fold opening, whereas in the stimulated male contact area waveform, the bottom of the waveform is more rounded. And we can see that right over here. Mean airflow, vocal power, and vocal efficiency. The male voice has a lower average flow to peak flow ratio than the female. The average flow to peak flow ratio displayed to be 0.52 for males and 0.62 for females. Results show that the female has a greater prephonatory glottal width at the vocal processes than the male. So this concludes that the female voice is 25% more efficient than the male voice due to a higher F0. So in summary, the goal of the study was to draw acoustical differences between male and female voices. And if there are, where exactly do these differences lie? The purpose of the study was to draw comparisons of the male and female larynx based on the size, tissue properties, and the prephonatory glottal shape. Extended speech samples were used to test these differences. The recorded readings of a text were analyzed using the long-term spectrum, the LTAS, extracting the amplitude values at intervals of 160 Hz over a range of 8 kilohertz. Recorded readings were done by 31 women and 24 men. The results showed a significant difference between genders as well as an interaction of gender and frequency level. The primary scaling factor between the male and female larynx is based on the membranous vocal fold length. The female voice showed greater levels of aspiration noise located in the spectral regions corresponding to the third formant, which causes the female voice to have a more breathy quality than the male voice. And this is the reference, the article in APA format. And that's it. Thank you for watching.